Our next speaker is, she told me a bunch of times and I had to write it down because I said, I've never heard that as a title, Director of Product and Design. It's no product manager. Director in Product and Design at Maple Leaf Sports. She previously did some stuff for Mint. So in the future, if you're ever looking for an app that allows you to, I don't know, bet like 13% of your income on the Raptors, she's your gal. And she's going to be talking to us about work that she did for her master's thesis about male allies. So please welcome Pansy Lee.
Can you guys hear me? Awesome. First of all, I want to shout out to that group with the Ruth Bader Ginsburg t-shirts. Those are so awesome. I bought one as well. Not that one specifically, but I bought one. I should have worn it tonight, but anyways. My topic is tech needs more men to support gender equality. And when people talk about women in tech, a lot of the stories and the conversations that we have around women in tech are how we can support each other and how organizations can be more inclusive. But what isn't talked about as much is the role of men in supporting gender equality. And even less so, what are the things that hold them back? And so 3 years ago when I started my master's graduate work, this was absolutely not on my radar. So part of that is because I've been in tech for about 18 years, started at Microsoft in 2001, and I never really thought about the challenges that women face working in tech. Part of that is because I was very fortunate to work at companies that were quite progressive, and I had a lot of managers who were really, really supportive. So fast forward 2015, I started working on my graduate research study, and I started noticing all of these articles being published around the challenges that women were having in tech. And when I started to read some of these stories, I saw a lot of my own experiences in their experiences. And one story that I always remember is I was applying for a job, I got an interview, I walked out of the interview feeling like I totally nailed it. And then the recruiter called me an hour later and said, Pansy, they loved you, but they're going with someone else because they weren't sure that the older white-haired men in the room would take you seriously. Yeah. So obviously I was super bummed, and the recruiter probably wasn't supposed to tell me that. But I'm kind of glad that she did, because now I have this story to tell, and it really motivated me to take on this topic around women in tech. So a lot of companies talk about how it's not that they don't want to hire women, it's that there just aren't enough women to hire. But if you look at the numbers tell a really different story. 40% of undergraduate STEM classes are actually women. And only 22% of them actually end up working in STEM fields. So it's not really that there's a lack of women to hire. It's more that there's an attraction and retention issue because 52% of those women are leaving the industry for a variety of reasons. So one of those reasons is biased evaluations. There's a really controversial study that actually shows that women's code is actually accepted at a higher rate if gender is not revealed. But when gender is revealed, it is accepted at a lower rate and scrutinized more heavily. So obviously the industry looked at this study and was really skeptical about the methodology. And perhaps there are flaws in the methodology. Every research project has its flaws. But the next example that I'm going to talk about is a little bit harder to argue. So this is Ben. And Ben is a neurobiologist at Stanford University. And Ben was assigned female at birth and transitioned to male in 1997. What's interesting is the transgender community actually brings a whole new perspective to this conversation because it holds skill and experience and all the things that we love to debate constant, and it really isolates gender as the main parameter that changes. So Ben talks about how when he transitioned to male, he was respected more. He was interrupted less. He was questioned less. And he even had this experience where he was at a conference, he did a seminar, and a scientist in the crowd came up and said, "Ben, you gave a great seminar, but you know what? Your work was always better than your sister's," not realizing that was actually the same person. Yeah. And as I was reading these stories, there are just as many opposite stories of people who have transitioned from male to female in the workplace and felt like they had to rebuild their credibility and were told not to be so aggressive. Another is hostile male cultures. So sexism isn't as blatant as this picture. It's not as easy to call out anymore. It manifests in ways called microaggressions, which are comments and actions that in isolation aren't really a big deal, but it creates this environment that feels like death by 1,000 paper cuts. So my sister worked at Apple, and she would have these experiences where men would just automatically explain technical things to her, not thinking that she would understand. Or she would have customers ask for a second opinion by a male colleague because they didn't trust that she knew what she was talking about. So you're probably wondering why I chose to focus on men when clearly my topic is about women in tech. And the idea actually came to me when I was talking to my VP at the time, and he was saying that he really wants to make sure that the women in our organization are being mentored and that their work is being recognized. But that he worries that if he spends all of this time with these women, that people would get the wrong idea. So it kind of got me thinking, if he, who is so progressive and has been such an advocate for me in my career, feels that he needs to hold back, then what else is holding men back from getting more involved? And my stance isn't always a popular one. Some people don't understand why we should support male allies. Some people don't think that we need to involve them at all. But respectfully, I disagree, and I believe that we do. And that's because gender equality is the belief that all genders should have the same rights and opportunities. And because ultimately, you cannot achieve equality unless everyone agrees that it's important. So I show this picture because it illustrates that exclusion can actually poison improvement and can even do worse. It can create backlashes. So this is a directional sign that I had put up for my workshop. Okay, it'll come up. And what's interesting about it is that somebody actually wrote LOL men's rights on it, which gets straight to the core of my project, which is that including men is really the only way forward. And so I focus on allies because allies often hold a lot of power. And historically, they've played a big part in other equality movements. And in a sense, we're all allies for some kind of cause or other movement, and we're all on this journey to being more informed. I've certainly said and done things that I probably shouldn't have, just because I didn't know better. But I've had the fortunate, I've been very fortunate to have people in my life who are supportive in correcting me in a very safe space. So I started working with male allies to understand what is it that holds them back. And these were the top 5 reasons that came up. So the first one is that they're just completely unaware that there's an issue at all. They're not aware that they have certain privileges. They don't know that women are being paid less. They're not aware that they're talking over women. And then you have those who do know that there's an issue, and then they struggle with, they don't know where to start, they don't know how to get others to care, and they don't know how to create an inclusive environment. The third is the fear of being the lone advocate. So now they're aware, and then they know what to do, but then they struggle with breaking from the pack and the fear of backlash from other men. The fourth one is one that almost all men that I speak to suffer from and that holds them back, and is the fear of being misunderstood. They worry about coming off like trying to be a hero, or they're coming off creepy, or they're saying or doing something wrong, and so it's safer for them to just not say or do anything. And the last one is that men find it challenging to evaluate people of different genders equally. And so all of us, not just men, all grow up in our own cultures and our own environments, and those go to shape our unconscious bias and our beliefs around gender norms, whether we like it or not. And so to illustrate, I wanted to share one more story. So the other thing that men really struggle with is how to hire for more inclusive and more diverse teams. And there's often this conversation about having to lower the bar in order to do that, which is ridiculous because women's code is actually, accepted at a higher rate. So to illustrate, I wanted to share this clip from the show Silicon Valley.
Richard, last interview of the day. Dinesh Guilfoyle, this is someone you guys recommended I contact. Carla Walton?
Yeah, we hung out with her a bunch at the last SF Bid Tech meetup.
Her code is fucking great.
She was head of engineering at Earcast?
She was engineering at Earcast. She built that whole system on her own.
You know what else excites me here? There's a distinct overrepresentation of men in this company. Look around. I think it would behoove us to prioritize hiring a woman.
I disagree, OJ. We should hire the best person for the job, period.
And Carla's one of the best.
Right. Let me rephrase. I think having a woman in the company is important, but hiring someone only because they're a woman is bad. I would never compromise Pied Piper.
Okay, but just to be clear, our top priority is to hire the most qualified person available, right?
Of course.
But it would be better if that someone was a woman, even though the woman part of that statement is irrelevant.
Exactly. It's like, we're the Beatles, and now we just need Yoko.
That's the worst example you could have used.
Oh my God, I never get tired of that clip. So obviously it's funny, but sadly it's also very representative of a lot of conversations around increasing diversity at companies, some that I've even witnessed myself. So this is very, very real. So I started to work with these allies to find ways to reduce these perceived barriers of getting more involved. And we created a toolkit with actionable tips and resources for each of the challenges that were listed, and we started creating a flashcard deck that listed the challenges, what it was all about, and then very, very specific actionable things that they could do. So I'll share a couple here now. So for those who don't know where to start, two really easy ways to start is, one, to just start being more aware of cutting off women when they speak, and if they do catch themselves, to simply stop and ask the person to continue. Another is to look beyond usual hiring pools. So companies will often go back to the same networks that they have found success in to find candidates. Privilege and other factors often exclude really great talent from certain networks. And so we started creating a list of organizations and associations that these companies can then reach out to expand their hiring pools. For the fear of being misunderstood, two easy ways to not come off creepy is to meet in public and open spaces. Don't book the meeting room that's in the corner with no windows and dark lights. Another one that surprisingly has put me at ease, and when I've shared this tip with other women, sometimes they've also shared that it puts them at ease, is when that person talks about their significant other. So it doesn't feel like they're hiding the fact that they're in a relationship. And then the third one that I'll share is around evaluating all genders equally. This one is more around hiring. So first of all, in order to even attract the right people, you need to create inclusive job postings. And I think it was said earlier that women will only apply to a role if they feel like they qualify 110%. So words like guru and ninja have been shown to detract women from actually applying to roles. And there's a great tool called textio.com telvista.com, maybe. It's on my website. Or Telvista, that actually will analyze job descriptions and pull out keywords that might be detracting people from applying to your roles. Another one is to hide identity in resume reviews and code tests. So there's a great Chrome plugin called unbiased.io, which actually strips names and faces out of LinkedIn so that when you're browsing profiles, you're not being influenced by that. And then another one is to interview candidates with diverse colleagues, and always to use a rubric. So list out the things that are really important, so that you're judging people on the same criteria. So obviously, the world is changing really rapidly right now, but it is also not changing rapidly enough. And so while men are trying to work towards being more inclusive, we also need to inspire more men to become allies and continue to advocate for ourselves. And the top 3 reasons that influence men to become allies is, 1, they hear stories of challenges from women they know. They they witness blatant gender bias at work, or they've worked with really talented female bosses or mentors or colleagues. So I want to encourage you to share your stories because it creates empathy and it gives people a glimpse into our world. And if you have the ability to do so, create diverse teams, whether it's from gender or race or orientation, or even different family types, because working with different people with different backgrounds helps people to look at things from a different perspective. And then the last one that I'll share is to share the toolkit so that they don't just have a list of all the things that they should stop doing, but also a list of things that they should do instead. And then for all of us, until equality is a reality, we also need to continue to advocate for ourselves. So first and foremost, know your worth. Please research your salary when you go into job negotiations. I've had to actually call a candidate back one time to tell her that she should ask for more money because she was asking for like half of what the men were asking me for. And it wasn't an isolated situation. I've actually had that happen to me a couple of times. The other one is what Sarah talked about is impostor syndrome, and it's a real thing. I struggle with it, other women struggle with it, and I've been very fortunate to have really great mentors and managers who pull me out of my own doubts. And then the last one I would say is to mentor other women. The personal experiences that you have will help the next generation. Even if you only have a year or two, that's a year or two more than someone who's starting out. And together we can create a healthy pipeline of women for this industry. Thank you very much.